All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to your 5th session with Siri. I hope you all got my email this morning. We are going to be starting a portrait from Siri for our long drawing, so it can go over the steps with you in terms of your own self-portrait from home. But to warm up, I wanted to go over our exercises like I typically do in class. So I'm just going to demo those 4 exercises we've covered again. Then I will set Siri up. You can hear me talk a little bit about setting that pose up. We'll talk a little bit about yours, go over some basic, simple structure. It should echo the exercises, your online exercises that you've been doing, and we'll get started on that portrait. So, to start, and even when we do begin a portrait, you'll see later, I still start with a gesture. Lesson 1, week 1 is gestures. So let's go over that again. Just ignore the drawings. See pretty well. Siri. Wait 1 second, let me get a board for my newsprint. Okay, guys. So still, with every figure drawing I'm doing, even when we simplify down to a portrait in the end, I am looking for the gesture, the flow of movement, the main axis of movement, any secondary axes of movement. So that is a concept we still want to keep in mind, even on zoomed in applications. So let's do some full body gestures, just to recap the gesture exercise. All right. Get my timer. And begin. All right, so still 1 guiding line. Feeling the movement of form in a lyrical, curvy way. Feeling those connections. And switch. Beautiful. Thinking about volume of the rib cage. Looking at those S curves, remember quadriceps, top to calf, those beautiful S curves we can see. And switch. So this is always a good way to begin working on balance with your figures. Balance and dynamic, rhythmic movement. I think of this always in contrast kind of to our hard line exercise. But we're learning how to see, right? The name of our module, learning how to see. These are all different ways and different things you all should be looking at when drawing figures or anything from life. Still 1 big one. Looking towards the spine. It's still quite a habit for a lot of beginning figure drawers to start with the head. Resist that urge and look for movement with the spine. Identifying that cradle, pelvic cradle, and the volume of our rib cage. All right, and switch. A little one. See, I'm feeling muscle moving over bone in a very curvaceous way. I'm trying to make connections that I see. These two arms, how can I feel that connection? Getting that little flip to the foot, I think is always nice. And switch. And this is always just a good warm-up, always good. When you want to be practicing something, maybe you have some spare moment to be working in your sketchbook. Most of my sketches for sculptures or drawings or paintings look like this while I'm working things out, trying to find those big movements. Gestures can really do a lot for you. And switch. In terms of a drawing tool, a good drawing tool. Memorizing some of those natural movements of the body, feeling that leg bend this way. You know, again, I'm always looking for that kind of flick of the foot with the tibia, rib cage moving like this, gluteus maximus moving outwards in that curved direction. All right, and switch. Let's do one more gesture and then we'll move on to silhouette. Beautiful. And stop. All right. Okay, so again, that was just a real quick recap of gesture. Let's talk about those silhouette exercises real quick. Again, just another warm-up. Thinking about volumes, comparative volumes, building up volume with this sort of smoky, cloudy effect, right? And seeing how masses of the human body relate to each other when they're in active dynamic poses. Okay. Get a little bit of seam. All right. And begin. So the silhouette exercise, session 2. In this, I'm inclined to start with the torso. Often feels like one of the bigger parts for me. This leg is bent, so I'm feeling just the volume of that entire leg. This guy's moving down. All right, how about that arm? I can feel forearm connecting with that lower leg. And notice again, I'm pivoting my charcoal to get these straighter lines, pivoting. All right, but there's an idea. Okay, and switch. So still very fuzzy. Let's go right here. So starting with the torso. Trying not to get distracted by overlapping forms, just focusing on the silhouette. All right, and switch. And this is a good exercise to do with anything. This is just another way of seeing something without details, but a relationship with volumes and mass. And again, you'll see me often end with the head. I still think proportionally that's an easier place to end up with than start. All right, and switch. Beautiful. Hard. Over here. Still starting with the torso. And this is a great exercise for a pose like this, where you have overlaps and you're really trying to get that foreshortening, maybe a big form moving away. So I'm really just focusing on this volume protruding in front of this volume. It's like being able to build a figure with very, I don't know, big lumps of clay, big blocks. All right, and switch. And the more you do these, the more your proportions will get more accurate. Perhaps at first you're still struggling with volumes, but the more you do these, the more you're going to be able to see, okay, maybe this thigh from the back side is the same volume shape as that calf. All right, last one. We'll do one more. Trying not to get distracted by that overlap, just focusing on the silhouette, right? It helps me see that that forearm and hand is coming out of this chest right here. No, it's really coming out there, but I feel this relationship. So just the silhouette, I can work on those negative spaces. All right, beautiful. Okay, Siri, do you want to just take a seat in the chair and I'll do some contours? Don't have to demo too much with contour. Sorry about that, you guys. Trying to use the last bit of space left in these. I hate to see a waste of paper. And I see so much of it in these classes. All right, so Siri is sitting in the light. Contour, you can see the shadow breaking over a particular contour. You can think of it as kind of, the direct diagonal from the light source. And that is the apex of that form. You can see it on her thigh right there, right? So those are one contours. Obviously, all of her edges, like the globe, right? You can think of the equator, but three-dimensionally, it's really like that, right? But still, those edges are contours, right? The medial line, those kind of invisible contours that you see remnants of in the human body based on anatomical forms, but those contours we look at, especially in this portrait we're about to start, I look at that medial line. You can see, just imagine bisecting Siri down the middle, down her forehead, down her nose, over her mouth, chest, down to her navel, etc., etc. How is that medial line moving over form? So when you're doing your contour exercises, it's just important to practice and get familiar with those various contours. We talked about blind contours, we talked about semi-blind contours. Really just taking that time I'm going to work on that contour, that shadow on her torso. It's very beautiful. Just taking time to really study, imagining I am the bug, the skiing man. Trying to get a feel for the quality of the line, the nature of the line, what it is describing. Beautiful. All right, how about a shoulder? So not a terribly exciting demo, remember, from our session that day. It's an exercise where you reap the benefits in the skills you acquire, not so much what you're ending up with. All right, but just remember to take your time and go nice and slow and really study, because you'll be surprised outline. It does things you don't always expect. All right, Siri, thank you. Okay, now we're going to go on to that fourth session. Just a quick recap, the hard line. We looked a lot at the skeleton. I like to think of the hard line as an abbreviation of the skeleton, just to help me get big structure going. We looked a lot at contrapposto. There's a blank space, where there is a shift in shoulders and hips, right? Contrapposto, shift in shoulders and hips. So the hard line exercise, I think, is a very valuable one. We're definitely going to use it when we start working out the details of our portrait, really work on some planar realizations of the face. But let's go over hard line real quick. So Siri, maybe about a minute for these. Reset and begin. Remember, still that pinching technique to work with the verticality. Still working on those angles. Looking at the anterior, superior of our iliac crest, those hips. And again, when I'm abbreviating the shoulders, looking for that clavicle, right? Right, but I'm still assessing, looking for that hip to that heel, looking from that hip to that heel. This one will be just a little longer serial, I don't know. So, ending with the head, I went off page, apologize. Squeeze that in here. I'm looking at that shoulder in relation to that wrist, just really abbreviating that angle. All right, then I look at those angles of her page. You'll also see a drop down on the stretch side. If this is the crunch side, that rib cage, because you know the rib cage is moving in. So you'll see a drop down and a crunch. So look for that kind of relationship too. But looking for that angle. Helpful with feet. Just trying to keep everything nice and hard. Remember, like I'm building Siri out of jagged wood that I'm later gonna go and whittle away. So something like that, right? All right, let's do another. And that was 2 minutes there. It's the one that feels okay, 2 minutes. I am sorry about it is this one, but this was a much cleaner one. All right, beautiful. So again, I'm still starting with the torso. Sometimes you'll see me break down the spine into two, and that breakdown is usually that rib cage. Sometimes you'll see me just abbreviate it into one line. But in this pose, I especially feel a twist right there. Then I'm looking at those hips, looking at those shoulders, feeling that movement all the way to that head. So again, when you're working on your figures, if we abbreviate this as the symphysis pubis, kind of the halfway point, 50 to 50, I'm feeling, looking at that angle from hip to foot, slightly inward, and this is moving way out, so it feels shorter. All right, so another line I often look at is this invisible line between feet, right? It just helps me draw a figure in space, identifying this line thread on the floor. All right, so let's go back up here to this rib cage I was talking about. Looking at those bottom ribs. Really focusing on my degrees of angles. Really focusing on that. Moving back in space, trying to get that quality. Thank you, Siri, for holding this for us while I explain. And again, lots of triangles in this exercise. All right, there we go. But just feeling our big shifts. Looking for hip to heel, diagonal relationships. Same with shoulder to elbow to wrist, shoulder to elbow to wrist, and looking for that V of that rib cage is helpful. All right. Okay, I think that was a pretty thorough demo. You guys remember hard line? Just review the other session. If not, take a break, Siri. Okay, so now I want to get going into our portrait. We don't really have a Nicolati's exercise that I want to cover specifically, but I will just talk a bit about that. But you're going to have to bear with me for just a minute while I set things up and get Siri started. And I'll also just talk about your self-portrait in terms of working from the mirror a little bit before we actually get going. So give me a 2-3 minute break while I get set up, and I'll be right back. We'll talk about portraits. I know everybody loves to learn about faces. Yeah, a little bit. But let me just figure out where this is, and well, but you just hold up, Siri. Let me get this all organized. We'll figure out where the couch, best place for the couch. Because I want you to be close, but not too close. And we have it. What do you think about the portrait if I keep my mask on and we stay 6 feet? Okay, we're going to keep our distance. We'll try to open one of these windows, and I'm going to keep my mask on, but I do want to look at your face. If I have to point anything out, I might use the very long poker. All right, guys, I'm just setting up my page. Now we'll give this place a good spray. Okay, guys, still have a little bit more setup to do. Let's see it over here. But I just wanted to talk about your portrait. So remember, as we've covered in class, this is going to be a self-portrait from the mirror. I think it's very important to take your time with your setup as well. I'm going to be posing Siri in a position where I can see some of her hands probably. I'd like to show and talk to you guys a little bit about hands. We want to still remember all the lessons we covered when we're looking at the whole body, and it should apply still to the smaller isolated study of our own heads. You guys did your skull studies from magazines. You looked at that skull from our Artists for Anatomy for Artists book. I think that's a really great skull to look at. So you guys should be getting more and more familiar with how your own features are related to this anatomical study of the skull that you've been doing. And I'm just going to tell you what I think about while I'm working on this portrait. And again, you guys can listen, fast forward, rewatch certain parts. But we're approaching this portrait in the painterly way. We're not working from a photo, we're working from life, and we're going to be seeing those in progress steps. So take some time setting up your mirror, setting up your easel. I have nice paper. I've bought some nice paper to work on this portrait that can take some aggressive manipulation with my material. So just take a little bit of time with your portrait. Yeah, we'll talk more about that and get y'all going on Thursday, but I think the best thing to do is probably to just jump into it. So I'm going to get Siri in my pose close to my portrait, and I'm going to show you how I start with gesture, even when I'm looking at something like a close-up of a face, like a portrait. When I'm studying the face, I still think of gesture. So again, bear with me for one more minute. Okay, Siri, let's get the couch over here. That's pretty bright. And lighting is important. We'll talk about that as well, but try and set up some reasonable lighting in your portrait. All right, Siri, I would like, so I was thinking to get some of your hands in. If you were sitting in like the corner of the couch with your feet up and you were in thought, and you just placed your hand on your chest. Maybe put your knees down, just like how you're thinking about something. So just take a few minutes and pretend I'm not even here, and just try and, however you can switch arms, whatever would feel natural. Maybe think of something. So and you guys should try this too. In the mirror, there's some sort of emotion that you want to convey. So just don't jump in front of the mirror and get at it right away. It seems a little, but maybe that, if we could switch, that's beautiful. That hand feels natural. I like this is okay. Now maybe just move your hand. Whatever you're doing is fine. If I know you look a little right now like a bobblehead, but just keep doing that. I'm just looking for shadows playing around on your face. Okay, go back to that rotation you just did. Right. It's very beautiful. What do you think about this? Does this feel like something natural you might do? All right, look in that spot again, Siri. Let's see. Just get a little shot of Siri. So take some time when you do this. You know, I really want to think about, I don't even know if that lighting is exactly what I want, but it's pretty beautiful. The daytime light today is very bright. Maybe I can tone this down a little. That's better. So you guys can still see my drawing. So I don't know if you guys want to include hands, but you know, it's a good thing to practice. There's some beautiful moments I like on her hands. Specifically, I like where that light is catching on the other side of her thumb, moving over her fingers. It's representing where the light is moving in shadow. I like that other hand that's holding her elbow. I don't know if I would include it. I guess I could get some of her knees too, that would be nice. I mean, when you're working on a portrait, you definitely want the focus to be the face. I'm gonna be cropping out some of her body. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't get that lower. Oh, it's pretty important. Her big, large neck muscle, you can see that tendon pulling her sternocleidomastoid. That's one of the breaking points that I look for in the neck. We'll talk about that. Let's see. And let's talk about hair. You know, for some of you guys with shorter hair, your hair might not change, but for other people with longer hair, your hair might change. I think using hair as a drawing tool, a compositional tool, is a lot of fun. And I know Siri's hair is going to change, but even as it is right now, I think it's a very beautiful shape that's echoing with her shoulder. When I was talking about that silhouette exercise, I was mentioning getting excited about light coming through bits of her hair. So there's nice shadows with that. There's, you know, I'm not jumping right in because there's still something I'm not quite satisfied with. And I guess it's my decision. I like the hand on the chest. It's like a comforting, contemplative gesture that I think is very lovely. But in order for that to make sense for me, I'm thinking I need to include that hand. That's not so bad. That's very nice. Now, do I need that hand? Maybe just hold your elbow again, Siri, like you were. That probably feels. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know if I need to necessarily have it. Alright, Siri, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn the couch a little bit. Just to get a little shift in your shoulders. Okay. Try and shift. There you go. Perfect. I like to have that break in the shoulder plane. That's something that's nice. If you can have some space between the shoulders, remember thinking about that diagonal cord. It's a little, some portraits are very straight, and that's fine. Maybe kings, something about the stableness is good, but a shift in shoulders, one shoulder being closer and one shoulder being further back, I think is a great tool in already setting up the pose for space. So it is something I look for. And that looks great with the hands. Yeah. Okay, that's beautiful. Is there any way, Siri, you can move your knee that's closest to me a little bit straighter just so it's out of the way of your... Perfect. There we go. That makes sense to me. And I'll include some of those fabric folds that creating nice diagonals. You guys would, let's talk about that real quick with your self-portrait. I don't care if you want to draw yourself nude. I don't care if you want to draw yourself clothed. I mean, we're all mature artists here. I think it is very helpful to start working with fabric. So if you want to have some cool sort of costume or just regular everyday clothes, I think that's a great choice. But whatever you want to do, it's up to you. But it does, what I was just saying, it does provide opportunities for really interesting diagonals. Okay, so I think this is beautiful. I've got a great sense of light. You might have heard before, or it's become popular on the web, of that like Rembrandt triangle. We have light breaking over Siri's kind of medial point on her nose, but then there's that little flash of light that's making, let's see if I can do it. It's making a triangle of light on her cheekbone. So the light is on me. The light is now coming from this way. And you can look for that triangle of light. On Siri, it's catching her eyelid. It's breaking over her nose. There's nice shadows. So try in your self-portrait as well. When you're looking at your master copies, look for that lighting, and try in your self-portrait as well to get some nice lighting so you can really start to sculpt form on the face. We're working with black and white media. We still want to work with just our value range while we're still learning about planes. So you have to have some strong lighting so you can really articulate your forms. And that's good while you're still learning the planar structures of the face. When we start to get into painting, figure painting, we're going to be able to use color to differentiate and sculpt form. But while you're working on a black and white portrait, I think it's very helpful to have very, very strong lighting, okay? All right. Siri, I think you could probably hold this for a little while, but no matter what the pose is, you always start going a little crazy when you're in it for so long. So can we try 25 minutes on this one and we'll see how that goes? All right. And I know you've already been in there for a good while, so it's more like 30, but let's try 25 and just... I always think you have to be really smart, and I know Siri is really smart to be a good model because you have to keep yourself entertained in your own mind. Siri knows. Okay, let me just get this set up so you guys can see my drawing, and I'm going to get started. Find the best way for me to draw. I like this kind of upward angle too. That's even better and more beautiful for you guys to see. Probably get Siri in there too, and you can actually see. everything at once, maybe. You know, Siri's gonna be very little on this page. Here, well, let me zoom in. We're about to go for a little ride, just so you can see Siri up close. Dang, okay, hold on, let me lower you down a little. Sorry, Siri, I know this is probably so weird. Let me get A. So, I'm looking towards her medial line, moving down. There's that break with her sternocleidomastoid, collarbone, shoulder, looking for that break in that wrist. And I'm looking for this harsh contour where shadow is breaking on this face, okay? Sorry, guys, I hope that doesn't make anybody dizzy. It's pretty good. I apologize if things are a little darker. I just want to see how I can get you and Siri and the drawing board. And still be able to see. Hold on, you guys. There we go. I think that works better. That's what I usually do. I'm sorry, you might just have to bear with my shadow a little bit. But if I step back, you'll see Siri. I can still draw. There's plenty of light. Okay. All right. It's important. I know it's silly, but imagine like you're going to build a house and you haven't leveled the ground, your house is going to fall. Same kind of thing with this drawing. You want to take precaution on every step of the way, even at the most foundation of foundational things, setting up your paper. If you guys don't have an easel at home, you know, a lot of you might not, I tape drawings to the wall all the time. It is so helpful, so great, just tape it right onto the wall. Get some, preferably painter's tape so it doesn't peel anything away, or the back of a door, but maybe you're taping your paper in your bathroom while you're working on this, right? Taping to the wall while looking in a mirror is a great setup situation. Okay, now there was a weird, all right, I've got some weird embossed advertisement here, which I don't want. I think this step is super important when it comes to making a portrait, because this really is like making a quilt, because we're almost working with an abstract idea of the figure, because we're not putting the whole figure in. So I could have all sorts of weird stuff cut off, and then it's just about these different shapes. So really thinking about your composition and those shapes from the get-go is crucial, pivotal in making a nice portrait. It's what takes a portrait from looking like a portrait, you're like, wow, that's a great portrait, and then like a study. So working with that verticality. Now I want to be very light, like just a whisper of these lines. Because I'm going to be a little less aggressive with a portrait, just because there's, I mean, in terms of my beginning steps, just because I don't want to have to battle with so many sketch lines later. Sketch lines like on a torso are a little less obvious than if you have a sketch line going like right across your portrait's eyeball, you know? So I am a little bit more gentle with my sketch lines on a portrait. Okay, so still thinking of my dynamic diagonals, and I'm responding to what I'm seeing with Siri. You can even see me doing my picture plane. But I've got a nice vertical picture plane, and her pose, if I want to get her shoulders and her arms, is nice and vertical. Much detail. I can still get a lot of detail. Siri, could you look up at me? Keep your head. Okay, now look over there. Now look down. Now look up over there. Down over here. And I don't have to have the model, or you don't have to be looking at the mirror the whole time, but play around with different gazes. Your gaze becomes a diagonal in terms of your composition, right? That's a diagonal force that makes a big difference. So maybe I want Siri looking at an opposite diagonal from her arm. Pretty. That looks, and there's this sort of like somber, contemplative, emotive quality I'm looking for, because that's, you know, what I'm interested in. So finding those eyes and that gaze to sort of capture that emotion is important to me too. That's very nice. Ooh, I really like that. Just a little bit. So I'm playing with shadows right now too, and working with those shapes. Beautiful. That's, I think, somewhere right here is what I'm going for. That's it. So whatever you're looking at right now, just kind of keep that in mind, but you can let your eyes wander and rest, okay? And that's like that. Okay, so what are some important things? Like I said before, I want that hand. So I'm marking kind of, I said before I felt like it was necessary to have that lower hand that's clutching her elbow, because it makes sense for then why her other hand is resting gently on her chest. So down here, I know I want that hand. Following that diagonal, shoulder, shoulder. So her arms are sort of like a big diagonal box. Look at how light, I don't even know if you guys can see it yet. I'll pull it in. Look at how light these lines are, but you can see some big diagonals. I'm already thinking about the couch she's sitting on. Think about what furniture you're on. Think about where you are in space just as quickly as you're thinking about information within the figure. All right, so here's just, I don't even know if you can see it really yet. Can you see? Yeah. So I'm looking, there's that breaking point on her neck to that shoulder. There's that other shoulder, arm wrapping down. Here's the hand clutching her elbow, other elbow up to other shoulder. And here's my gesture of that hand on that chest. Here's clavicle. And here's some sort of semblance of medial line. So still, and all these lines aren't going to be my final lines. All these lines are still going to vibrate into place, all right? But I'm taking into consideration my composition early on. I'm thinking about things that are going to give me trouble. I mentioned that hand slipping off the page. Okay. All right. So, something that I do, which a lot of you might be a little uncomfortable with, is I pretty much go into big value blocks right away. I really think working at a portrait like a pattern in the beginning is very helpful, and then going and crisping up and still moving things around. But in order to kind of take myself away from an illustrative approach, this sort of drawing very precisely with line and then shading and filling in, I think it's really good to get the temperature of your light, the temperature of your values down as early as possible. So I took a big step back right now, and I just want to assess my composition. There's a lot of space between this hand and this head, believe it or not. Certainly a little bit more than 50. I think I've got enough room. But I want to make sure this space is long enough for me. I think that's what's going to cause me trouble. So, move everything on up. Something I look for, I'm going to need scrap paper. Again, I've got nicer paper today, so it's a little more grabby, so I'm being more gentle. But in this pose, let's just get very sketchy, anatomical real quick. I can draw a little more intensely so you can see those hard lines I'm thinking of. Okay. So, looking at that medial line very early on, I definitely want to determine the angle of her head. I'm thinking of the big round cranium that you guys looked for. I can feel the angle of a jaw. So look at the angle of the jaw in relation to your medial line. Something I'm looking for in this pose, which I think is another thing that's nice with space. I feel this contour. Jaw overlapping that sternocleidomastoid, our large neck muscle, and our trapezius, which is our shoulder. Clavicle, clavicle, deltoid. So with this simple anatomical knowledge, which you guys should have gotten a lot of experience with your online activities, That's a great thing to start breaking down, but looking for this jaw to neck to trapezius relationship. Jaw to neck to trapezius relationship. So, I think just lower this hand, get a little bit more space on this arm. Now I'm going to start to do my big value blocks. Biggest thing I'm trying to show you with this is to let go of line until later phases. So I'm thinking already about my atmosphere and my light. Good, that's a little straighter. And then when I step back, you can see Siri. Okay. So I'm already thinking about Siri's got a harsh light, more direct light kind of coming down this direction. So if I think of like this cone of light, I'm going to feel this veil of darkness within the space and atmosphere up here. I'm going to feel there's darkness down here because of, you know, where she's leaning against the couch, but and I want to feel that light on the end of the couch. So I'll make this space behind her dark as well. And I feel that light on the edge of the couch. kind of moving around the figure, still keeping things very fuzzy, I like to say. And I'm just sort of working in big value movements now. Feel like it's a bit like paint by numbers. You've heard me say this before. But I'm sort of going around edge for edge of the figure and assessing how form is being created with light. Identifying that breaking point in her clavicle. Our little depression in our neck right here is very helpful, especially in relation to that clavicle. And I don't want to leave Siri's hair behind. Again, I was saying it's, I think, going to be a really fun and beautiful drawing tool, but the hair can really change how you perceive the volume of the head. So I do try and get like a semblance of, you know, the hairline, the darkness or lightness of the hair. I think about it with edges of the neck. You know, I think that's a beautiful thing and a great tool. All right, let me zoom you guys in so you can see. Sorry for my shadow. But I think you can stay in this phase for a long, long time. And just kind of keep things very light while you're organizing your big shapes. All right. And I'm going to start, since this is a portrait, we'll start breaking down the face a little bit more concretely. But you can see I've just sort of hinted right now at the dark side of her face and a little bit of the eye socket. Remember, look for your eye sockets being about halfway. Let's do a quick facial thing. I'm sure you guys, how are you doing in this series? You're doing okay? Can we see? I'm sure you guys have seen this before, so I'll be quick. Mass conception of the head. Remember from Robert Beverly Hale? Let's just abbreviate like that, right? Medial line. Oftentimes, eyes are about halfway. It's hard to think about because then this is the hairline. So sometimes that might be a little confusing. I often draw this whole eye socket region because I think the zygomatic arch in relation to cheeks are important. Your nose you can usually split about halfway between chin and those eyes, and then your mouth about halfway between that. They say the face is about 5 eyes wide. 1, 2, 1 eye in between, 3, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, hairline, top of skull. Ear to jaw is something we look for. I don't see that really in Siri's pose because her face is facing me pretty directly on, but if you're doing more of a side, look at ear to jaw. The highest point of the head, this point, is 1/3 up and 2/3 down. So we're seeing that point and that point. And you can watch these kind of videos and you can learn these kind of things, and that's all well and good. And it's great to have that anatomy in your mind. Hopefully that was becoming more clear on celebrity faces that you guys studied. But in the end, still, working this way is about assessing the pattern of shapes. And that's what we're focusing on. And the portrait is a good place to do that. So let me take a big step back. I'm a little tall for this easel. I can raise it. But I want to check my overall composition as early as possible. I like this diagonal quality, this kind of subtle swooping down this way. I'm including some hands and wrists for me, but also for you guys. She's in the couch. There's a nice shape. There's something about a gentle swerve of that couch that feels nice with this swerve of her arm. And that plane. I always love a good long neck on a portrait. There's that shift in space in shoulders that I'm looking for, or that I like to set up. Some sort of hair right here. Oh, they say your ears. Forgot our ears. They say you can look for your eyebrow in the bottom of your nose for your ears. You know. These are all just general rules of thumb, and these are the sorts of things that you commit to memory just intuitively. But you have to understand that every body is different, every face is different, every body is different. And kind of having this proportional map in your mind and being able to assess those differences are really, helpful. Another one that just comes up to the top of my head while we're talking about that, something that there's a lot of 1/3, 2/3 relationships. An eye is usually 1/3 this way and down this way. And most people's eyes have an upward inflection. Siri's got very lovely almond eyes. There's definitely an upward inflection on that outer corner. But sometimes people have down eyes, where the outer corner is much lower than the inner corner. And you can spot that immediately. And you're like, oh, their eyes look a little different. They're fine, they're beautiful, beautiful eyes. But there's these kind of differences from this pre-described norm that become obvious when you start looking at faces. So next time you see with someone with down eyes, that little lower corner being lower. It's a fun thing to notice. I'm still trying to be right. Big shapes. All right, let's start doing and I think a big thing to learn is that this is going to change and this is going to grow, and not to be so hard on yourself right from the get-go. Not everything has to be perfectly accurate right away. It'll all vibrate into place. But right now I'm really focusing, first things with the portrait, I'm focusing on that medial line to get the direction of her head. And Siri's looking a little bit down, especially from my view standing. So I'm looking for the ellipse of her brows. That brow structure is it's a very important piece of facial anatomy for me. So those are two of the very first things I look at. And I'm sort of assessing I like to get big shapes of eye sockets in. And when you're drawing somebody with sort of a downward cast, all these proportions are going to get smaller, right, as the form is turning over. So I just made a simple little line for the bottom of the nose, a simple little line for the bottom of the chin. Excuse me, mouth. Okay, here we go. Here's my guide. When I'm drawing a mouth, okay, so I just made a little bottom line, very abbreviated. They say the corner of your mouth relates to a vertical with your eye. So a lot of times I'm looking for just that spot at the edge and how it meets together. So spot and spot, little Cupid's bow, and then I'll abbreviate like this. Why don't you take a little break, Siri, if you can remember that pose, and we'll take some time getting you back into it. But just it feels like it's been a while. Or do you feel okay? Okay, great, excellent. Thank you, Siri. So looking for point and over Cupid's bow, it's very helpful looking for, like, let's say that's the medial line. It's very helpful when you're trying to turn a mouth around, right? So when you're drawing the mouth, I can simplify with a line, but I'm looking for those two corners, the 2 points of the corners of the mouth. I'm looking how much space there is between the bottom of the nose and the lips. Okay. Nothing's set in stone, and I'm still just making place marks, really. Nothing is more annoying than drawing a great nose or a great eye or something and then having to move it. So still try and keep things very geometric, basic. I'm identifying, just like I did with the mouth, I'm identifying the inner corner and outer corner of the eye in still a very loose way. A lot of times when I'm working with eyes, Just like with the mouth, I get so much mileage out of corner to corner, looking at that lash line, and then just thinking about the darkness of the iris. I can really move eyes around with very little effort. Just while I'm trying to figure simple things out. I think keeping things as simple as possible in the beginning is just helpful while you're organizing your space. So I get a lot of mileage with just iris and lash line and eyebrow. I really think about that whole eye socket, looking at eyebrow all the way around our zygomatic arch, like you guys looked at in our studies, and then placing that eyeball within the eye socket, and the eye socket is in relation to the whole skull. So here's just a quick first little dab of information. I'll probably play with it in this phase for a while. I don't want my face to get too further ahead than anything else. So that's where I'm at. That's a good place to be for all of you guys. I don't want to get too dark, and I want to get used to my eraser very early on. This should remind you of our silhouette exercise. Pulling away bits of light. Trying to keep an idea of values going even early on. All right, let me take a step back. What do I feel? I feel like this eye is a little too close, or I need to pull it out. In relation to the other one, something that's very helpful, I want you guys, and if you had sculpture with me, you probably remember this too. Look for this triangle. Corner, corner, bottom of the nose. What angle does this triangle make on your face? If you can identify it, because that triangle, that proportional triangle really describes a lot of faces. Females will have a much more compressed triangle because our faces are a little rounder, and males will usually have a more narrow triangle. So looking at outer corners to bottom of nose. And I say that because Siri's got a very, almost perfectly even triangle. Like, her eyes are very large and set apart from her nose in a pretty dang, like thirds, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Okay, so look for that triangle. And I'm pretty happy with where her face is going. I mean, there's nothing really to it, really. But I want to not let my whole drawing just get sucked in to that. So I'm going to jump away from the face. Sometimes it's important to push yourself away from things. If you find yourself really, maybe obsessing sounds so negative, but hyperfixating on one particular feature, realize when that's happening, and I suggest just hopping to another section for the time being. So I'm going in with a little bit more line now, just like right now I'm thinking about how her top is relating over her collarbone. Get a lot of nice movement over a form. I'll show you what I mean. And you can get a lot of nice movement over a form with that. I love the way how her thumb is sort of naturally resting on her top like that. It feels very spontaneous. I really believe that in this drawing, maybe I just came upon her. There's some definite foreshortening going on with this hand, which is going to be hard, but fun. I want to think about, so let's see if you can see this. Let me zoom in. Right up on that hand. So this hand, this wrist that Siri is got bent over her chest is closer to me than the tips of her fingers. So I'm trying to move that away. I think the hard line exercise is really helpful with hands. We're looking for this break. Look how, I mean, it's round right here, but this is very square, this to this. So you can see I'm identifying that break, and I can feel shadow on that top plane. Let's see, break, a little confusing. Break to break, a little bit of it down. Beautiful shape. And so this hand is moving, all these fingers, you can't see where fingers are connecting to palm. These little guys get more curvy. I don't know if that's, might be a little too far down. It's pretty close to that break. And that's what I mean about not being totally perfect. I don't know if that hand's totally perfect just yet, but it's better. But it'll get there. Best to not. It's like make, again, an essay, right? I always think of the essay. Just make a stab at something, get that paragraph in, and then go back and check facts, check sentences. It's kind of the same thing with this. You can always, I find something very helpful when you're drawing the hands. You'll see me do it over here. Is we talked about in hard line the Nike symbol. There's that wrist. Really, you can do so much with just the creepy claw. But when you're drawing fingers, this first knuckle, whoop, this first knuckle has a lot of flexibility, right? We can really bend a lot in, but if you try and bend your second digit, it's like a lot less mobile. So I'm always looking for a big bend on this first one and maybe a more subtle bend on the second one. You'll often see me also flare a finger, especially a female finger, but any finger, male too. I'll flare it up like that. And that's just a quick abbreviation of a nail, you know. You can really describe a lot of nails and toes. There's a toe, right? You can really describe a lot of form. Ooh, God, that got bad. You can really describe a lot of form with toenails and fingernails. But in the meantime, when you're just getting started, that little flick up is a good abbreviator. So there's my hand. I just reassess that little flick up. Yes, take a break right now, Sarah. Getting to be that time right now. Oh gosh, this goes by so fast. Hard line, flick up. But I'm still letting things be very, I mean, to you guys, that drawing might seem like I'm making a lot of permanent decisions, and I promise you I'm not, but I'm still allowing for room for things to change around a little bit, but I am starting to nail down things that I like and things that I want to kind of work towards that endpoint. Take your time. Yeah, we haven't even, this can be our longer break series. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Portrait modeling is hard because it's like you really can't move your face. It's any modeling is hard. If any of you are working from siblings or parents or anybody at home, I'm sure you're maybe experiencing their grief, or maybe you've been working from yourself, and you're experiencing that already. That modeling. Modeling needs some work. So what do I think? I feel like maybe I need more towards this way. That's better. Pretty soon you're going to start to feel like, I don't know, this elbow was going this way, so I felt the need for more shoulder to go this way. You're going to start to get these feelings for forces and opposing forces. Just the more and more you keep working with figures. I'm hoping by studying some of these exercises that we've been looking at in class, you guys are already getting a good sense of that. That's what those Nicolati's exercises are trying to get you all to see, are different movements, right? Some things maybe you might not think of right off the bat. Now I'm just taking my chamois and unifying some of these shadows. This is a good stage for that, probably. I'm trying to still stay away from anything terribly dark. I mean, it happens just with drawing, but hopefully by now you guys have gotten a sense of what paper feels right for you. And you're learning more and more the nuances of how to work with it. And I'm always looking for new papers and new things. Well, Alex, why did you just wipe out over those fingers? Because I know those fingers are in shadow from this head, and eventually I'll go back and outline some darker darks and bring out some lighter lights. But I do like to sort of carry shadows over into things. Just technically, it's a nice, easier thing to do. Probably start working on that other hand here. You're kind of thinking about things like in that Poussin phase, right, from our Poussin studies. I'm not getting too far value-wise, but I'm certainly making decisions as I go. And a portrait from life versus, a portrait from a steady, solid photo. This is going to change and evolve, and the model's going to move, and you're going to move and grow and change, and I think embrace that, especially in this self-portrait from home. Be working on it for quite a while, you saw. So just get into that frame of mind where you are prepared to let things grow. This is going to be a piece that grows and changes. So while I can stay in this simple phase, I'm just trying to nail down some important key features, but I'm not trying to perfect any one thing, right? Like I'm not sitting here and rendering the nose. I'm not sitting here and rendering the eyes. Although I did just get a very nice eye right there. Oh, that's so pretty. Nice thing with charcoal, sometimes too, you get little happy accidents. Here, watch, I'll show you. Look at this eye. All I did was with my eraser. All right, but you get a sense she's looking down. Oh, that's weird. Simple, simple shapes. Why do I always have such trouble setting this back up? And I like where my composition is going. got some interesting stuff. Am I gonna let this hand go off? Okay, here's an interesting consideration that I'm making. So far, my figure, all the information is contained. Shoulder, shoulder, head, shoulder. I've been drawing in this hand. As you guys know, I've been contemplating this whole time, but this hand, I need to determine if I'm gonna let it break the page. Sometimes I like to be congruent with my border breakings. Like if one thing is gonna break the border, then I feel like something else needs to break the border. If nothing's breaking the border, then that's another thing. But I don't know about this hand being the only thing breaking the border. And I would consider those sorts of things in your composition as well. I don't know. A little bit, shift those shoulders a little bit. Okay. Pull your thumb, you have your thumb tucked just on the curve of your top. Perfect. Maybe pull your hand a little over towards your further shoulder. There you go, that's the ticket. And looks good, shoulder. That's the face. Good. Okay. Alrighty, Siri. Check the time. 2:17. Is 25 minutes bearable? Love the light catching on her far fingers over there. Really identifying that shadow line. There's a beautiful contour. Not trying to perfect it, but I'm shooting for it. But what I was noticing was contour breaking on hand and then contour breaking on finger. So those little steps in your composition are very helpful. Beautiful, tiny little line. I know a lot of you are thinking about comics and animation and stuff. I think somebody that, I actually took a art history of the graphic novel in undergrad, and I love that class, and I love graphic novels. And one of my favorites was Sin City, the Sin City series. I love how he makes this whole world with pretty much black and white shapes. And you can think about your composition and your portrait in that way while you're designing your image. I think a lot of beginning students don't think enough about that image as a whole, and they just want to jump right into the subject. And I appreciate the enthusiasm, but it will go a lot further if you spend even more time in this phase, making a good, solid foundation. It's hard not to get hyper fixated on one thing. So for your life drawing sketchbook this week, week 5, Week 7, session 5. I'm sorry for the confusion with all of that, but you guys, now we're going back to just weekly drop boxes. So this will be week 7 for this session. Practice our exercises, and when you get onto our long drawing, hopefully you can find maybe somebody to work from. If not, do just an hour self-portrait. I wouldn't mind if for these next 3-4 weeks for your hour drawings, for your life drawing sketchbook, you did self-portraits. It's only going to give you more oomph for your final self-portrait. All right, but again, that's for your Thursday class. But for Tuesday class, you can certainly keep working on portraits. Let's go down to that hand I said earlier. Yeah, not listening to mine with this. This is my focus hand. I think it's beautiful. Maybe a little low on that chest still. I can move it, but I don't want to let my other hand go. So let's see. I'm looking for, I think a bend in a wrist is always attractive. You know, don't get it every time, but I was drawn to this bend in her wrist. Gotta adjust that. See, look at the beauty of holding yourself accountable. So bend down, there's that. So there I made this adjustment. Again, I just identified what you're looking at. What you're looking at, as you guys know from your anatomy, is our radius and ulna. Right? We're looking for this bone structure. Your ulna, that larger protrusion, is always going to be by your pinky. Our ulna is related to our pinky, so that more dominant protrusion, the more rounded one, is related to your thumb. More knobby pinky, more rounded thumb. So I'm back to this hand, and I am working with hard line. There's that wrist break we just identified. I'm going to pull that upper palm, this square. Let's do some hard line. So one thing when you're drawing the phone, let's see. So if you're palm, there's middle finger, pinky moving out that way. When you're drawing your palm, and here it is just in a big version, right here and right here, it's right here and right here, I look for right in between 50% for this first joint. All right, basically, oops, there we go. But this is where you feel where your thumb comes up, basically halfway through. 50 and 50. So there it is. Pointer finger, wrist, plane. Here we could do our Nike symbol. And then I'm looking right in between for that first break of her thumb. That finger is being carried with this gesture of her palm as it's wrapping around your arm. Clean that up just so you guys can see. This is a little very outlining for me in this phase, but just while I'm showing you the structure. And you can see what I mean about that tension, right? Like, gee, I don't know. Do I want to feel this knuckle right on the edge of my picture plane? But nothing else is really breaking the picture plane? Maybe not. I don't know. I'm gonna let that hang out and see how I feel based on the rest of the composition. Yeah, I don't know. I'm figuring stuff out too, which is, again, I keep saying one of the fun parts of this. But let's get some of those. There's a nice relationship. So everything is moving in this direction. I'm trying to get the other side of her chest in relation to her hand. There's a wrapping quality of her arm right there, so I want to try and capture that. So I got a lot of big structural ones. So if you could just turn your head a little bit this way and a little down. Perfect. All right, but again, I didn't want it to go too far before I jump back. Let's do a little zoom in. I can do this as well as I can. There we go. Everything is still very sketchy. And you guys, I don't think this is a place you guys should probably be for the first drawing session. You know, I've been doing this for a while and I can make decisions more quickly. So if it takes you a little while to get to a place like this, I think that's totally fine. And you should, you know, you should be trying to think about the exercises we've covered. And that might take you a little bit of time to get familiar with drawing this way. So just try and stay in this phase for as long as you can. I'd be happier to see you guys playing with these kind of shapes and values and getting these right before rushing and moving on. There's some light catching right below her brow bone right there. We have a little, so this, here I can even tuck it under my arm. This is our, you can feel it. This is a ridge of our eye socket. Oftentimes your eyebrow starts below and moves above the eye socket up on here. And you can see that catching on Siri's brow right here. So I'm just using my eraser and removing some of that. Guys, if you haven't before watching any like makeup tutorial demos is I think actually very helpful. A lot of makeup is highlighting structure of the face. So you'll be able to see how certain forms are sculpted in that way as well. You'll find a breaking point on our skull, oftentimes on the arch of the eyebrow. You can see, as you guys learned, that's that frontal bone, our forehead breaking to the side. So again, you can look for it right here. You can see mine's breaking right here, and then it breaks to the side. That's where my shadow is catching on Siri. So that is an important facial plane. And whether you have done it purposefully or not, you've been studying your own face your whole life. You know, every time you look into the mirror, you're seeing yourself, you're registering some part of yourself. You know, they will say an artist's drawings or paintings will look a lot like them, and It's because, you know, those are the features that you've been looking at and memorizing the most. So take extra special care when you're looking at specific features, the shape of your eyes, the shape of your lips, the shape of your nose, breaking it down into hard lines and looking for those simple geometric shapes. When you're working on the nose, you're starting to kind of map things out a little more specifically. Just like we're looking for the corners of the eyes and the corners of the mouth, I often look towards the nostrils. The nostrils are just a dark spot, but they can also turn the nose around, just like the corners of the mouth can turn a mouth around. If I have like a little nostril on one side and a big nostril on the other side, that means my nose is turned. And see here, look, it's not perfect, but just getting an idea of one nostril being smaller and one nostril being bigger, it's sort of turned my nose a little bit. So take a look at your nostrils as well. Now, right now I'm keeping, Siri's got highlights on her face, but I'm trying not to be too seduced by details. It's very easy to want to jump into details, but I don't really want to get away from light or dark shapes. Keep pulling up that Poussin study in your mind. Because while I'm still organizing, I'm still in major organizing mode. And you don't want to waste any of your time perfecting something just in case you still need to move it, which has happened to me so many times. It just happened to students so many times. So the longer you can remain uncommitted, the better. I might just barely hint at a little mid-tone right now, just to kind of remind me that she's looking down. Taking a big step back. It's so important, you guys. Look, here I am, all the way back here, all the way to my drawing. It's so important to really, the larger you work, the further you have to be able to step back, so you can see with clarity. And there are some things I'm going to work on. I want to try and push her head down a little bit more. And there's this beautiful lean she's got. It's very delicate. Clean up some of this. Just 2 more minutes. So if I draw something like that hand down there, I want to go and sort of evaluate the simple value block relationships kind of quickly. And eventually I'll probably go back in with some other pastels to get some of these whiter whites that I've lost. You see, I am really using the side of my charcoal quite frequently. All right, you see, I went to break. Let me take a big step back, and I want to look, and then I'll pull it in and show you guys again. All right, let me pull it in. So these, I got a lot of line, but I'm gonna start, eventually I want to start removing those outlines. So, but they are helping me keep in place while I'm drawing. Let me try. Sorry, you guys. But I want to eventually start considering my edges and outlines. Remember we talked about edges and outlines? I tried, if I'm gonna put that hand against that edge, maybe I'll try and push that elbow against that edge. I don't know, we'll see. But start really thinking about the images you're making and not just about, I'm gonna draw this and get this right. Probably have room for 1 to 50. We do another 25er? Okay. Okay, a little bit too much of a shift, so a little flatter towards me, other way. Okay, too much. A little. All right, relax that shoulder a little. I think you're a little slightly more reclined. Perfect. Focus. Okay, thumb on that collar. Finger. Perfect. Now just okay, a little too much back towards me and down just a smidge. Perfect. Right there, and then looking at that spot. So I don't have any light catching in Siri's eyes, and she's got such beautiful feminine cat-like eyes. It doesn't even bother me. I do get a nice little highlight on her eyelids, but again, I'm really considering what sort of emotive quality I want in my drawing. Maybe in your self-portrait, you try and express something to me about how this quarantine has been making you feel. My goodness. Self-portrait in isolation. My biggest tip with portrait drawing is start with those eye sockets in relation to the skull. Eye sockets and eyebrows, and then use those simple abbreviations. Corners, nostrils, corners, to get a lot of drawing mileage. Oh, such lovely shadows. And maybe you want to include some accessories. You know, Siri's got some beautiful hoop earrings on that I am just going to love to include. I'm probably not going to include them right now, though, just because they'd be a pain to move if I had to move them. Things like that, like accessories, hair, are some of the things I can wait for sometimes. But these little hoop earrings back there on the dark side are really creating some nice shapes. That would be a super fun silhouette. I'm gonna do a little bit, why not? Let's just get the vibe because it's so pretty. A lot of things in shadow sometimes I'll leave a little more ambiguous. You know, I'm trying to replicate the idea of seeing, you know, some things in shadow aren't always as clear. I think clarity is definitely something to consider when you're working on this. What details are clear and what are a little more fuzzy, a little more ambiguous. So Siri has got a highlight on her shoulder, and I want to catch the intensity of light on that couch. Maybe I'll make this a straight line. Give her shoulder just a slight wash of a light value. It's not really. There we go. So I just made her shoulder a little bit darker because I want the intensity of the couch to create form against, and then I'll pull that highlight back out from the middle, but I want the slightly middle darkish edge of her shoulder to be described by the intensity of the couch. Beautiful. You guys might get into modeling in this a little bit earlier on than you would in some of those long figure poses. But just understand that it's going to fluctuate. Try not to go for any finalized, finished modeling too early on. Gosh, it's going to be really hard for me to leave this here and not work on it. I always get so excited with portraits. I just want to take them home and keep going. Luckily, you get to do that with your self-portrait at home. Haha. I want to develop my space at the same time I'm developing my figure. It's so important. I don't know how to just jam it in beginning figure drawers' heads any more clearer, but you make such further progress if you let all of your drawing develop at the same time. If you go back and try and color it in, you just miss something. I don't know how to put it in any simpler terms, but don't let there's something to be achieved by the gradual development of the whole piece as a whole. There's a technique. I'm trying to remove an outline. I told you before, this paper is very grabby. You can see a lot of my sketch marks, which is probably going to force my hand to use some white pastel, which is fine eventually, but I'm trying to hold off on that because once you commit to adding another material, if you're just working with charcoal, you can be flexible and move a lot of stuff, and that's good, and that's what we want. But if you add your pastel, I think, too early on, it becomes an endeavor in technical control too quickly. So try and embrace the mess as best you can for a little while. Let's see, what am I going to do? Darker. Here's a good decision-making moment. So right now I'm looking at Siri in person and she's wearing blue jeans, but the darker part of her arm right here is pretty similar in value, her skin right here, to this blue jean. I would say it's mostly a color difference than it is a value difference. So what am I going to do? I mean, naturally, I want this corner to kind of fade from the viewer's awareness. I don't want it to be, it's not an important corner. I like this diagonal quality of it, but I'll probably what decision am I going to make? What decision? You usually find a darker value right at the breaking point. Then you might get a little bit more light in the reflected light zone. So then probably, that nice and dark as well. Don't want to lose my beautiful wrist break there. And the shadow on her arm is shifted, but it went back to that original shadow, which I like even more, because now I get that little slice of light on her arm that's across her belly, that's coming from this hole under her wrist, across her belly, and that little slice on her arm. The little moments of drama, light drama like that, are visually interesting. You can see how it's just pushing my lighting, right? Ooh, you can feel that little bit of light going through. It's pushing my lighting experience even more for the viewer. While I'm up here working on the eyes, let me say something about eyes. Beware of eyelashes, you guys. I think you have to handle eyelashes very delicately. I'm in a position right now with Siri. She's got full eyelashes. They're actually creating a shadow, right? They're actually creating a shadow, and I can make out individual eyelashes. Now, I may go and get a little bit of that detail going, but I think in beginning figure drawings, nothing can really sort of make a face more illustrative than very highly defined individual eyelashes. So in the beginning, hold off and just sort of abbreviate into a line of darkness, Here, I'll pull them up. So I'm getting a sense of eyelashes, but I'm not making like Betty Boop eyelashes, you know? And I'm still, things are moving along, but things are feeling dynamic. I need to push that head a little bit more. I should be taking way more steps back. This little kind of flip of her hair that Siri's got right there is helping that head, that skull to feel like it's moving away and over. I'm getting, again, some detail of her hair, but nothing yet. I think that'll be a lot of fun and a great drawing tool for me when I'm ready and cemented with that. But in the meantime, I'm just kind of working on this. It's like the silhouette exercise, just this fuzzy shadow. But I am kind of thinking about light hitting it. So, I've just got some dark on either side of the roundness, but I am thinking about light hitting the top of her hair and her head. Let's see. This is a really nice one. So, got some more contours to work on with that arm. Let's get some darker. Darks over here, right where her shoulder. Just working on value relationships. I like the darkness of this shoulder against the lightness of the couch, so I'm adjusting that. And you'll see me do this often, and you should do it too. Don't be afraid. I'm going over old forms. Sometimes I'm making sacrifices to get value and light right, and then I'll go back and reestablish detail and such. And if you have a nice grabby paper like this one, your lines will be in place still. Defining that breaking point with your shadows. It's very helpful early on. I think in portraits, starting from areas of lightness and moving on to darker areas is helpful. For drawing purposes, but also just for those technical purposes we were just mentioning, those sketch lines and things like that. That's a shadow from her hand and arm. And I know the tips of Siri's fingers aren't completely black, but they're in shadow, and I'm just simplifying the hand right now so I can get the sense of that light moving over the fingers, but I'm getting a little confused, so I'm just breaking it into black and white shapes, just like Sin City, just like Poussin, right? Just to keep myself organized while I'm still working on the structure and the big quilt pattern. All right, well, we've got about 5 more minutes for today, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit more. Good day. And as part of this discussion group we're about to enter, I'm going to be looking at all these stages with you guys. So I'm going to be able to help you all identify drawing problems, make suggestions, as are all your peers. Should be very exciting if we can all keep on the ball with participation. Having feedback from your peers and from some people who know what they're doing or care or anything is super helpful and something to be treasured. So I hope we all really get into the swing of making nice critiques over the next few weeks with each other. And I'll put in some of the texture of her top. You see with tops and clothes, you can really describe a lot of form too. You'll feel that strap moving over her collarbone. And eventually, once you're drawing from yourself, you're going to be referencing yourself less and less. And sooner or later, you'll be working on more things from your mind than you are from observation. Observation is a jumping off point, but eventually you're going to start moving stuff around based on your sense of design and line. A little bit of light catching on Siri's tear duct. I don't want to miss that detail. I don't want to get too, it's so easy to get too excited by these things too early on, but I don't want to miss too much. All right, well that will probably do it for today. Siri, thank you so much. I know that's tough modeling. Portrait modeling is tough for some reason, isn't it?
It's just like I feel like the nose is constantly flaring.
Or itching, or it's like every itch becomes more magnified. All right, so let me just wrap up with them. Okay, you guys, let me take you in for a zoom in. A straight shot as best I can. Jesus. Jesus, Weezus. Okay. Oh, God. Okay. Well, let's try that. So, trying to still keep everything very loose. There's my little dark black fingertips. I'll have to go back in with my eraser. Still keeping simple values. Using hard line and curved line. Zoom back a little. All right. So, remember for Thursday's class, I want you guys to be thinking about your master copies. We're going to be talking about 3 choices of yours, and we're going to get going on this drawing and talk about our discussion posts. So, I don't know if maybe I was a little unclear about the life drawing sketchbook, week 7. This is session 5, but now we're going to be putting it under week 7. I want you to use this class period, Tuesday's class period, to review your other 4 exercises: gesture, silhouette, contour, hard line. And then try and do your hour-long drawing of a face. Maybe your own face, just a quick self-portrait. Maybe you'll have somebody who wants to sit with you, but do try and make your long drawing a portrait, okay? All right, you guys, email me if you have any questions, and I will talk to you all live virtually on Thursday at 9 a.m. Bye.